At the time of recording this, it's spring break over here in North America, so it's the perfect time to pick up a new book. Go! Welcome to Fuse. My name's Dan Gold, and on this episode, Omnicom's President of Growth and Development International, David Gallagher, joined me. I started by asking David about his new book, Truth Be Told, which he co-wrote with John O'Brien.
I didn't realize it at the time as we went through this process, which was largely over 2020 during the pandemic. But I think it kind of contains two different books, and maybe that's because there are two different authors behind it. Just a little bit about John. His whole life, his whole professional career has centered around the notion of purpose, both from a personal point of view, a business point of view, and now from a marketing and communications point of view. So he's a true believer in the power of purpose and a defender of purpose. In fact, before he got into this line of work, he was an infantry officer in the British Army. And I say that because I realize in hindsight that he sees the world, I think, through risk mitigation. So in his view, he saw a lot of agencies, consultants, and brands talking about purpose in ways that were risky. They weren't necessarily living up to its true potential. They weren't authentic, or in words that he would say, they weren't true. So he felt a real need to kind of set the record straight and talk about purpose in a more authentic, sustainable way. Now, I completely agree with all that, but I come from a different background. I'm a journalist by training. I've been in communications most of my professional career, and I'm quite optimistic. And I saw this more as an opportunity. And I thought that for brands and companies and organizations that get it right, if they can really attach their value proposition to a sense of purpose in society, culture, the community more definitively, more authentically, they do better. They would attract better quality people. They would keep their customers and clients longer. They could ask for a premium price, or at least for a loyal customer base, and they would actually outcompete their competitors. So, long story short, I think this book molds both theories into place. There is what we call the risk of purpose washing, of cynically attaching a brand or a company to a cause. And that's the risk that John wanted to mitigate. I see it as an opportunity. I see that if you can really tap into this vein of goodwill and human truth, your brands will differentiate.
How have you seen purpose really applied to organization in a meaningful way?
Well, so interestingly, again, this book was born in 2019, which seems so long ago, and it's such a different world. But we saw a few different things happening that we thought were relevant. One, business leaders at the highest level, the Business Roundtable in the U.S., was talking about the need to redefine business in a different way. To get beyond the purpose of a company is going beyond shareholder value to talk about multiple stakeholders, the community, employees, society at large. And that suggested to us that something big was going on. We also saw people much more attuned to the behavior of brands and companies than ever before. Back in 2019, when we were first mulling this over, that was kind of at the height of the Me Too movement, but that quickly, I don't say gave way, but other socially powered movements like Black Lives Matter started to emerge. And what you saw was a much more networked, tuned in, and activist public than it existed before. And opportunities or issues could arise overnight for companies and brands. So what we heard were organizations responding in one of three ways: putting their head in the sand and just hoping this would go away. Sometimes cynically trying to exploit the emotion of the day and attach themselves to values or ideas that weren't actually true to the way they were operating, or those who were actually trying to get it right and really listen to what their communities were telling them, what was true about their business, and then tell stories that would connect the two in ways that made sense. So what we wanted to do was address all three, but spend most of our time talking about and trying to unlock the potential of personal communications.
with the journey that the world has been on since 2019 into 2020, we've seen these periods where we've had the shock and disappointment of what caused the Me Too movement. We've seen the shock and disappointment of what caused the realization of the Black Lives Matter movement becoming mainstream because it needed to. And we have, as you've said, seen organizations who have got it horribly wrong in terms of whether it's been tokenism or trying to ride the coattails, not just in terms of communication, but in marketing and advertising as well. I think we can all look potentially at Pepsi for a misstep in that one. I saw some research, and I don't know whether this is particularly accurate in your mind or you're aware of this research, but during these times where there have been economic downturn and financial
headwinds, right? Just economic headwinds, right? It's been difficult.
Those organizations who've really invested in purpose and their model being around purposefulness have weathered it better.
I think that completely holds up, and there's a number of sources of recent data, some of which covers the pandemic period. Unilever, in particular, tries to value their brands and try to connect them to authentic purpose, and they show a strong positive correlation to well-articulated purpose with the brand's performance. Some of the consultancies that we work with in our group, that John and I work with, Porter Novelli in particular, look at the value that consumers attach to purposeful brands. So there's plenty of data to suggest that this is a good strategy. I think the how to do it is the harder part. And in some ways, I think this book and the feedback I've been given, it serves I hope at least two audiences. There are plenty of good executives, brand leaders, corporate board members that we interviewed, many of whom are profiled in the book, who already understand the power of purpose. They understand where it sits in their organization, and they understand that it's more than an ad campaign or finding the right influencers, that it needs to be embedded in the entire culture of the organization. What they're looking for, I think, is not necessarily a cookbook, but some best practice examples of how do you really listen to what's happening in the world? How do you draw clear insights from that? And then how do you draw stories out of your organization that make sense to people and that you can tell authentically? So they already get the purpose part of it. What they want to know is how, so they can talk to their agencies or talk to their consultants or talk to their own teams and make sure that it's done right, because they all have those cautionary tales in their mind. There's another group of people that I hope the book will benefit who know perfectly well how to draw an audience insight and are quite adapted at developing mindful, data-driven, creative campaigns. But they might be a little bit confused by the terminology that's used. And there's no shortage of jargon around purpose or CSR or ESG or sustainability or philanthropy or cause-related marketing. And all these things have validity, but they get a little bit confusing to people. So what we're hoping is that this book, and again, we didn't want to reduce it to a cookbook, but we were hoping that if you were entering this conversation with a good understanding about how purpose works, you'd be given some examples about how to listen better and how to develop stories that resonate truly. If you already get that part, but you're confused about what it is we're talking about when it comes to concepts of truth or purpose, you'd have some context, both historical and current, to examine. And the initial feedback is that we're getting it right. Most importantly, I think, rather than telling people how to do it right, it's more have a conversation about how to do it right. So that's my hope for the book, is that whether someone follows my exact prescription or John's exact analysis is not really the point. The point is to have conversations about being aware of what's happening, understanding the power that, for better or worse, you can attach your brand to when it comes to purpose, and then doing so with real intention.
Time is working against us as Fuse as a short form podcast, but there's a question that I'd like to ask you in terms of we all start out with good intention, but how do we make sure that we don't get to the point of wringing the neck out of it and start to take advantage of it, even unintentionally?
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, and I guess maybe it'd be a good problem to have. Is once you are so associated with a clear Patagonia level of purpose for the planet, do you run the risk of overplaying your hand in that regard? I actually don't think that happens that often. I think most organizations, brands, actually fall far short of the potential of a well communicated purpose and centering around a human truth. So if people have that problem, I'd say take a break and give it another shot next year. I'm betting few brands are there. I think there's a flow to this, and the first thing we ask or suggest to our clients is that get very clear about your purpose. Literally, what are you in the business to do? What reason do you exist to serve? And it should go beyond making money. We usually say it should be about solving human problems or serving planet problems, but at least leaning into a real human need. It's then having some accountability for what you've achieved, what you've actually been able to do in various parts of your business to support that ambition. The third step is usually we would suggest is to engage all aspects of your community, the people you're hoping to sell to, but the people who are more tangentially connected to your purpose, and ask for what should we commit to in the future. So what should we do together collaboratively to advance us toward our purpose? And then how do we express that aspirationally? How do we communicate that aspirationally? Which should ladder back up to a reconsideration of your purpose, and you take your purpose up to a higher level. So I can't think of too many companies that have gone through that cycle so many times that they've done their job. But if they have, I would commend them. But I think everybody can kind of keep this virtual spiral up and keep making further commitments, expressing themselves aspirationally, and then driving that sense of purpose to a new level of aspiration, of commitment.
David, I'd like to let people know where they can find out more information about you and the book.
So I am on Twitter. I'm on all social channels, pretty much usually as T-Bone Gallagher. There's another story behind that, but I'm easy to find there. John O'Brien is at John Writ Large on Twitter and Clubhouse. It is available on Amazon in the UK and the US, easily found, truth be told, or at Kogan Page, which is the editor, easily found on their site as well. But I really hope this starts a conversation that I think is more important than ever as we emerge from the pandemic and we start to redefine where our companies and brands and businesses are going.
All of the links relating to this interview are in the episode notes and on prca.org.uk/views. Now for our quick-fire feature.
My name is Stephen King, and I'm a lecturer in media at Middlesex University, Dubai. The one innovation I cannot live without are virtual backgrounds. I have done some research over the summer which shows the impact of being forced onto Zoom and MS Teams. Many people have found this very uncomfortable because they have been forced into this environment. They've lost the agency of how they present themselves, and they're having to invite complete strangers into their homes. And this is the same in a work environment, but it's even more pronounced in education, where young people are introducing themselves to the world for the first time. I find that the virtual backgrounds help provide a secure space for both me and my students, and to create a very safe space for which we can learn together. There's a great campaign from Pakistan, from BBDO, whereby they painted children's pictures onto the backs of trucks. These children had been kidnapped and were victims of child trafficking, and these trucks would drive all across the country with the pictures of the children on the back, and they helped to save so many of these unfortunate and tragic victims from this horrendous fate. The book that's had such an important impact on me was The Art of Happiness by the Dalai Lama. In this book, the Dalai Lama explains the difference between joy, which is the pursuit of short-term and temporal happiness, versus activities which bring happiness into your life for the longer term. That's had a very strong and deep impact on my life. do take a lot of effort to maintain mindfulness and mental health. I play saxophone. I play since the start of the pandemic until now. I've moved from being able to play Happy Birthday and Baba Black Sheep, so now I'm rattling off another one, Bites the Dust, and Beat It from Michael Jackson, plus many, many, many tunes from Andrew Lloyd Webber and from the Disney musicals.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fuse. Please do subscribe and let colleagues know about this 15-minute PR, marketing and communication podcast.